It was a Friday afternoon, 2 hours since they had left New York, with one more hour of driving ahead before reaching home. They had just dropped off their only child, Alice, at college. Sandy glanced over at her husband, Mark, who was behind the wheel of their Ford Transit. They couldn't take her BMW 230i convertible because they needed the space for Alice's belongings. Time flies, she mused. It felt like only yesterday when she took a pregnancy test on her high school graduation day and discovered she was expecting. Mark was still in university, studying to become an engineer. Both sets of parents, familiar and supportive of their children's relationship, rallied around them. Sandy stayed with her parents after Alice was born, and she and Mark married once he completed his degree. Since then, Sandy has been a stay-at-home mom, witnessing her husband's journey from a junior engineer at a local firm to a successful entrepreneur with his own HVAC business. Over the past decade, Mark's hard work has paid off with substantial contracts from major construction companies. He has always dedicated himself to both his career and his family. "The house will feel so empty without her," Mark said sadly. "She was always closer to you than to me, always Daddy's little girl." "She's our princess and deserves to be treated like one," Mark replied. "But have you noticed how she's behaved these past few months? She treated me terribly. When you were home, she was constantly by your side, sometimes even mocking me. When you weren't here, she would lock herself in her room, avoiding me entirely." "Sandy, come on. She's still just a child. She was under a lot of pressure during her senior year. She wanted to get the highest marks to achieve her dream of going to Columbia University. At least try to understand." "I know, Mark, but have you seen how she reacts when we're in the same room? Do you remember 2 months ago when I was sitting on the couch and she came up behind me with a knife? I thought she was going to hurt me. I saw pure hatred in her eyes." "You're imagining things, Sandy," Mark said, irritation creeping into his voice. Sandy stayed silent, not wanting to prolong the conversation. She didn't want Mark to get angry, at least not now. Taking out her cell phone, she sent a text. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. A minute later, her phone beeped. "Is it from Alice?" Mark asked. "No, it's Peggy." "And how is she getting along with Jasper?" "Last time at our barbecue party, she was ranting about him working late nights, putting in too many hours, and caring more about others than her. She should know the job of a sheriff isn't easy. She should have thought it through before marrying him." Once again, Sandy stayed silent. She wanted Mark to remain calm until they got home. She leaned against the window and silently wished they were already there. As Mark turned into his driveway, he noticed a sheriff's car parked in front of the garage. Mark parked his van behind the car. Jasper and his assistant climbed out and greeted him. "What's going on?" Mark asked, confused. At the same time, Sandy ran and stood behind the assistant. Mark frowned. "This is the worst part of my job, which I hate doing," the sheriff said, removing a manila envelope and handing it to Mark. "Marcus Moore, you've been served." "Jasper, is this a joke?" Mark's hand trembled as he took the envelope. He turned to Sandy, who looked down, unable to face her husband. "Why, Sandy? What did I do wrong?" "Mark, it's best if you leave," Jasper said. "See a lawyer and start the divorce process. There's also a restraining order. You have to stay at least 500 feet away from Sandy." "Jasper, you were here last Sunday with Peggy for Alice's going-away barbecue. Both of you knew this was coming. You came to my house, ate my food, drank my drinks, and wished Alice good luck with smiles on your faces. This is hypocrisy at its worst. Mark, please try to understand." "Understand what, Jasper? That you're a jerk?" Mark yelled. He turned to Sandy with anger in his eyes. "And you, Sandy, you betrayed me. If you didn't love me anymore, you could have just told me. We could have divorced amicably." "Mark, the restraining order is already in effect. You need to leave," Jasper said, trying to stay calm. Mark stormed to his van, threw the envelope onto the passenger seat, then slammed the door. He approached Jasper again. "I need my personal things. I hope you're not such a jerk that you'll stop me from getting them." He took out his house key and headed to the front door. "Your key won't work," Jasper said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket and handing them to his assistant. "I see you've handled everything, or was it Peggy? She was supposed to be here today with a locksmith while we were away, right?" Jasper just nodded in response. The assistant guided Mark into the house, staying close as Mark packed 2 suitcases. "Don't worry," Jasper assured Sandy. "I'll have my guys do regular patrols here. I wouldn't leave the house unattended for a few days if I were you. He's extremely angry and could do something reckless." "I'll stay home," Sandy replied. "I'll call a friend to spend the weekend with me." "Yes, a friend," Jasper muttered under his breath. Mark emerged with the suitcases and loaded them into the back of the van. The assistant handed Sandy the set of keys. Mark opened an envelope and began reading the divorce papers. "Mark, you've got your things. It's time to leave," Jasper ordered. "Wait, this bitch is asking for 50% of my business, 50% of all our savings. She wants the house, her car, plus monthly alimony. She's cleaning me out." "Mark, if you don't leave, I'll have to arrest you," Jasper warned, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "No need, Jasper. I'll sign the papers right now and disappear." Mark grabbed a pen and swiftly signed everywhere the small arrow stickers indicated. "Can you please attest the document and give me my copy?" Sandy, Jasper, and his assistant stood there in shock, unable to believe Mark had accepted the conditions so readily. Sandy smiled, feeling lucky. She had everything she wanted and was free of both her husband and daughter. Jasper, still in disbelief, signed as a witness and handed Mark his copy. Mark climbed into his van. "Who is he? How long have you been dating him?" Mark lashed out at Sandy. "Go inside and lock the door behind you," Jasper instructed Sandy, who was accompanied by his assistant inside. "Don't do anything stupid. Think about Alice." "I already did something stupid when I married this bitch," Mark shouted, starting the engine. "She preferred to divorce me because she knew I'd never accept an open marriage, like you." "What? Open marriage?" Jasper was stunned. "Don't try to hide it, Jasper. Everyone knows." "What are you talking about?" Jasper almost screamed. "Look, Jasper, we all know that when you're working nights, your brother Tom is warming your bed. Are you trying to turn me against my brother, you son of a bitch?" "Oh no, she's cheating on you." "I hate to be the bearer of bad news." "Jasper, you're a sheriff, trained to spot a liar. Go home and confront Peggy. You'll see for yourself." Mark reversed and left the property as instructed. Left alone, Sandy poured herself a glass of wine and admired Pagnol's masterpiece, The Train Station. The painting was worth over $100,000. He left it here, his loss, she thought with a wicked smile. She grabbed her phone and hit speed dial. "Come on, Frank, pick up." Sandy yelled into the phone before hanging up in frustration. "He should have come straight here after work," she muttered. Sitting down at the table, she sipped her wine and recalled their first meeting a year ago. They'd bumped into each other at a department store, where he worked in the shoe department. In his early 20s with a perfect body, he made her melt on the spot. They exchanged numbers, and she called him the next day, inviting him to her house. After he left, she could barely walk. That night, she told Mark she wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. From that day on, she knew Mark could never compare to her lover, who was young and full of energy. Mark was always busy, always tired in the evenings. He spent his nights helping Alice with her homework and then poring over his files. The moment his head hit the pillow, he was out like a light. Sandy finished her wine and poured herself another glass. She pressed speed dial again, only to hear an automated voice message. "The number you are calling is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later." Frustrated, she threw the phone onto the couch, picked up the remote, and turned on the TV, but couldn't focus on the screen. She decided to take a shower instead. A week ago, she had showered with Frank. Just the day before, she had been at his apartment. With a spare key, she could visit her lover anytime she wanted. Sometimes, she would go there while he was at work and clean the entire place. She bought him clothes, shoes, cologne, and had even given him an expensive watch for his birthday. Occasionally, she slipped him some pocket money and gave him rides in her BMW. Oh God, I need him right now. I really want to see him, Sandy muttered to herself. She tried to recall the last time she had slept with Mark. Was it 3 months ago? 6, maybe longer. She didn't care. She had her young lover, a real man who would satisfy her. Now they could be together without fear. She was free, and he would move in with her tonight. After her shower, she walked into the living room, grabbed her cell phone, and cursed. "Where are you, Frank? Why aren't you answering?" She went to the kitchen and made herself a light dinner. Damn, I can't leave the house, otherwise I'd go to his place. Just then, something on the TV caught her eye. She rushed back into the living room and turned up the volume, watching in horror as Jasper, handcuffed, was led to a police car. Sandy finished her wine and poured herself another glass. She pressed the speed dial button again, but heard an automated message. "The number you are calling is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later." Frustrated, she threw the phone on the couch, picked up the remote and turned on the TV, but she couldn't focus on the screen. She decided to take a shower. Only a week ago she had showered with Frank, and the day before that she had been in his apartment. She had a spare key and could visit her lover anytime she wanted. Sometimes she would go there when he was at work and clean the whole apartment. She bought him clothes, shoes, cologne, and even gave him an expensive watch for his birthday. Sometimes she gave him pocket money and took him for a ride in her BMW. Oh God, I need him right now. I want to see him, Sandy muttered to herself. She tried to remember the last time she had slept with Mark. Had it been 3 months ago? 6 months? She didn't care. She had Frank, a young lover who truly satisfied her. Soon they would be together without any fear. She was free, and he was going to move in with her this very evening. After showering, she walked to the living room, grabbed her cell phone and bellowed, "Where are you, Frank? Why aren't you picking up?" She headed to the kitchen to make herself a light dinner. Damn, I can't leave the house, otherwise I'd go to his place. At that moment, her attention was caught by something on the television. She hurried back into the living room and turned up the volume, watching in horror as Jasper was led in handcuffs to a police car. Sheriff Jasper Rogers shot his wife in the head and then drove to his brother's workplace, where he shot him 5 times. Both the wife and the brother are confirmed dead, announced the informant. Sandy, stunned, switched off the TV and sank into her chair. "Oh, Peggy, I told you to be very careful," she sobbed. Unable to sleep that night, Sandy felt an overwhelming sense of isolation for the first time. She had just kicked out her husband, her lover Frank was unreachable, her best friend Peggy was killed, her daughter was avoiding her, and her parents had long passed away. The only person left was her sister, who lived far away with her husband Tom in a city 300 miles away. The entire Saturday went by without any word from Frank, leaving Sandy anxious and irritable. He could at least leave a message to let me know what's happening, she thought repeatedly. By Sunday morning, frustration took over, and she decided to drive to Frank's apartment. Upon entering, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The pictures on the walls and electronic items were missing, his walk-in closet was empty, and none of his personal items were in the bathroom. Devastated, she collapsed onto the bed. He left me without a word," Sandy cried out. "How could he do this to me? It was his idea to divorce Mark, promising we live together and get married once the divorce was final." Desperate for answers, she drove to the department store where Frank worked, hoping to find him there. She spoke with one of his colleagues, who informed her that Frank had left work shortly after arriving on Friday morning, claiming he forgot his wallet. He never returned and later that day sent a resignation email to the boss. A shattered Sandy trudged to her car. Why? Why did he do this to me? She sobbed. On her way home, she stopped at a gas station and, to her astonishment, found that both her credit and debit cards were declined. She cursed under her breath as she grudgingly paid with the last of the cash in her purse. Back at home, she drowned her sorrows in alcohol. Come Monday morning, she marched into the bank and requested to see the manager. She was stunned to learn that there was less than $5 in her joint account. "Mrs. Moore, last Friday, your husband came in and closed your joint credit card. He also notified us of your impending divorce and informed us that he would no longer be responsible for the mortgage on the house or your car, the manager explained. That's impossible. My car was paid off in full, and the house mortgage should have already been settled, Sandy responded, bewildered. The bank records show a car loan, Mrs. Moore. We have all the paperwork right here. Additionally, your husband took out a second mortgage on the house for your daughter's university fees and expenses. But why is there no money in my account? Sandy demanded. Your account was debited for the mortgage installment last week. There have been no deposits for the past 3 months, depleting whatever funds were left. What about my husband's business? There were supposed to be monthly transfers from his company's account. Unfortunately, Mrs. Moore, I can't disclose information about Mr. Moore's personal or business accounts. However, if the upcoming mortgage payments are not made, your house and car will be repossessed, the manager stated firmly. But I don't have a job, Sandy exclaimed, feeling desperate. I recommend you discuss these matters with your lawyer, the manager advised. After the meeting, Sandy checked the safe deposit box she shared with her husband. Only her jewelry remained. She gathered all of it and placed it in her handbag. As she left the bank, she tried calling Mark on his cell phone, only to be met with an out-of-service message. Frustrated, she called his office, but the phone just kept ringing. She cursed again and then quickly dialed Alice's number. What do you want? Alice shouted angrily over the phone. Is this how you speak to your mother, Alice? Sandy asked, bewildered. How else should I speak to you? Alice retorted. I just want to talk to your father, Sandy stammered. I can't reach him. Do you know where he is or how I can get in touch? I know, but I'm not telling you, Alice snapped. The way you heartlessly dumped him makes you the worst person ever. I want nothing to do with you. I don't consider myself your daughter anymore. Don't call me again. In fact, I'm changing my number. The phone clicked off. Sandy sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her mind adrift. She wondered where her plan had gone wrong and why Frank had left without a word. She made a call to her lawyer and secured an appointment that same afternoon. Mrs. Moore, after your call this morning, we conducted some investigations into your husband's company, Sandy's lawyer began. Last Thursday, he filed for bankruptcy before being served. The company is likely to be liquidated. But you said I could get millions, Sandy exclaimed. Calm down, Mrs. Moore. 2 weeks ago, there were no signs of financial trouble. Everything was in your favor. Now the company's bank account is frozen. What about the car and the house mortgage? Last week, he used your house as collateral for a loan, again before being served. For the car, when you signed the ownership documents, you also signed for a loan in your name. This can't be true, Sandy wept. Mrs. Moore, did your husband have any idea he was about to be served? No, Sandy replied, deep in thought. He never saw it coming. She sighed. So, I won't get a cent from my husband's company. I have no money in the bank, and my car and house will be repossessed. I'm afraid so. Is there any way to make him pay the mortgage at least? Without the company, he's broke. Once he finds work, we can pursue alimony. We had some investment certificates that I couldn't find in our safe deposit box. We can investigate when he cashed those certificates and conduct a thorough audit of his company. We also need to locate your husband. His legal advisor is currently handling everything. Please move forward with that, Sandy said. Mrs. Moore, just a heads up, there will be additional fees for all of this. How do you plan on covering the costs? Sandy, who hadn't considered the expenses, suddenly smiled. I have a painting that's worth some money. Great. Convert it to cash and write us a check so we can get started. Sure, I'll call you soon. One more thing, Mrs. Moore. In the worst-case scenario, you should be ready to vacate your house. I recommend you start looking for a place to stay. Once home, Sandy sat in front of Paganel's masterpiece. I really wanted to keep you, but thanks to my jerk of a husband, we'll have to part ways, she said to the painting. She then took out her cell phone and called her sister. Hey sis, I need a favor. You know I've never refused you, Sandy. Mark and I are getting divorced. What? Is this some kind of joke? No, it's complicated. I need a temporary place to stay. Could I stay in your guest room? I'll explain everything when we meet. What about Alice? How's she taking it? You know she's Daddy's girl. I'm the bad guy here. Is there no way you two can work things out? Maybe see a counselor? I don't think so. I'm really sorry to hear that. No problem on my end. I don't think Tom will object, and our daughter will be excited to have you around for a while. Thanks, sis. I'll let you know when I'm coming. Sandy hung up. On Tuesday, Sandy went to a goldsmith to get her jewelry appraised, only to discover that all her pieces were gold-plated copper and essentially worthless. She cursed Mark for giving her fake gifts. She then hurried to a fine art gallery and met with an appraiser. I'd like to know the value of my Pagnol's, the train station, Sandy said. The man meticulously examined the painting. The train station is indeed Pagnol's finest work. He managed to capture a spectrum of emotions in one piece: arrivals, departures, happiness, sadness, all in one scene. He placed the painting carefully on an easel, directed a spotlight on it, and used a magnifying glass for a closer inspection. After a few minutes, he started laughing. Is something wrong? Sandy asked, puzzled. Hold on, I'll show you something. The man brought his laptop, set it up next to the easel, and opened a website. He keyed in a search, and an image of the train station appeared on the screen. He zoomed in on the bottom left-hand corner. You see here, there's a man and a little girl standing on the platform, watching a woman walking towards the train with her back to them. The man looks very sad, and the girl is crying. I can see that, but what does it mean? Sandy was confused. Now take a look at the same scene on your painting. The man handed her the magnifying glass. Sandy glanced at the bottom left corner and nearly fainted. In yours, the man and the little girl are laughing and pointing at the woman, as if mocking her. It's a fake, Sandy stammered. Yes, but it's a very good one. Oh my God. Shocked, Sandy pulled out a chair and sank into it. I can offer you $200 for it. I'd like to hang it in my gallery for the amusement of my friends and clients. Defeated, Sandy agreed to the deal and left the gallery feeling shattered. Her phone rang, and she saw her sister's number. Hi, sis, she answered, trying to mask her despair. Don't call me sis, you bitch, shouted an enraged voice. What? Why? Tom received an email from an unknown sender. It was also sent to all our relatives and mutual friends. There's a link to a site full of videos exposing your affair, dated from last year to last week. How could you, Sandy? I can explain. You were having fun with a guy in your own marital bed. And some scenes are in a sleazy motel room, the voice continued to yell. Please, let me explain. No need. You're disgusting. Tom doesn't want you near his family. He said you'll contaminate me and my daughter. Our doors are closed to you. Go to your lover, or the line went dead. Oh my God. They know. They've known from the start. Sandy's face twisted in horror. What do I do now? Panic set in. Everyone knows. The whole town knows. I have to leave, run far away from here. 5 years later. Mark. Mark sat in the front row of the church, his thoughts occupied by the phone call he had received earlier that morning. He hadn't mentioned it to anyone. How could he on such a significant day? Just moments ago, he had walked Alice down the aisle. He watched as Alice and her sweetheart, whom she'd been dating since her freshman year of college, exchanged vows at the altar. His mind drifted back to the day he received a tearful call from Alice. He remembered being in his office when his princess had called him, her voice trembling. Dad, please come home, Alice had cried. What's going on, sweetie? Why are you crying? Mark asked, shocked. Please, Dad, come now. I'm waiting on the street in front of our house. In front of the house? What's wrong? I'll call your mom, Mark offered. No, don't call her, just come. Please, Dad, Alice pleaded. I'm on my way, sweetie, he assured her. As he drove home, Mark felt a rising wave of anxiety. Questions flooded his mind. Why wasn't Alice at school? Why was she outside the house rather than inside? Why didn't she want her mother, Sandy, involved? Was she injured? Mark snapped back to reality as he slammed on the brakes with a screeching halt, narrowly avoiding running a red light. Stay calm, he told himself. He remembered how hard Alice had worked on her project the previous night, with Mark helping her save everything on a USB flash drive. Alice was waiting a block away from their house. Mark pulled over, and she quickly got into the car. "Please don't go to the house, Dad," she begged. "Okay, Alice, what's going on?" Mark asked, turning off the engine. "I forgot my USB drive this morning in my rush to get to school. I got special permission during lunch to come home and pick it up. When I arrived, I saw an old Honda in our driveway. I went inside and heard strange noises coming from your room. I crept up the stairs and peeked inside. The door wasn't fully closed," Alice said, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, sweetheart, take a deep breath," Mark said softly, stroking Alice's back. "Take your time." She sobbed harder before managing to speak. "I saw a man with Mom. They were both naked. She's cheating on you, on us." Mark was stunned, not only by the revelation but by the maturity of his 17-year-old daughter, who understood the gravity of infidelity. "Are you sure about what you saw?" he asked, turning to face her. "I recorded it on my phone," she replied, pulling out her cell phone and playing the recording. Mark's world seemed to collapse as he heard Sandy's unmistakable voice. "Get her out of the house, Dad. I don't want to see her anymore. She's not my mom. My mother would never do such things." "I need to think about this," Mark replied, trying to remain composed. "What is there to think about? Just kick her out," Alice demanded. "It's not that simple, sweetie. There are legal procedures we have to follow." "Do you still want to stay with her? Do you still want to sleep with her?" Alice asked pointedly. "I don't condone cheating, but we need to understand why she did it, whether it's a one-time thing or something ongoing, and whether it will continue." "Look, there he is." Alice pointed to the old Honda leaving the driveway and turning away from them. "Let's follow him," Mark said, starting the engine. They tailed the Honda to a store, where they saw the man putting on his uniform jacket before walking towards the employee's entrance. "He works here. He's young," Mark observed. "Young or not, I don't care," Alice responded, snapping some pictures of the man and his car. "We now know where he works. I'll drop you at school. I'll go home, get your flash drive, and bring it to you. I'll tell your mom." "She's not my mom," Alice interrupted vehemently. "I'll tell Sandy that you called me and asked me to bring it to you. I don't want you to face her alone, not now or any time. Do you understand?" "I understand, but why not confront her immediately?" "Because I don't want her to know that we know just yet. I don't want you, in your anger, to reveal everything." "What are you going to do?" "I need to know everything." "Promise you'll keep me in the loop." "I'm going to set up surveillance at home. And yes, Princess, I promise to keep you informed." "I love you, Dad," Alice said, hugging Mark tightly. "Love you too. Now take me to school and bring the USB quickly. My class starts soon." Mark pulled into the driveway of their home and walked inside. "Honey, I'm home." Sandy rushed out of the bedroom with a look of shock. "Oh, Mark, it's you." "Who did you expect?" he asked, looking her squarely in the eyes. "I didn't expect you home at this hour," Sandy remarked, a hint of surprise in her voice. Alice called. "She forgot her flash drive, and I need to bring it to her." Mark approached Sandy with a playful smile. "Got time for a quick fun in bed?" "Really? A quickie. I'm exhausted from cleaning, and I'm all sweaty. Plus, you need to get that USB to Alice." "You're right," Mark conceded. At work, Mark started researching the best video and audio surveillance devices, along with cell phone spy software. Later, he visited an electronics shop and purchased everything he needed. That day, he resolved never to touch his wife again. True to his word, he would share everything with Alice. Over the next 3 months, Mark gathered plenty of information. He learned everything about Sandy's lover, Frank Clark. Frank visited their house almost daily, either in the mornings when he was on the late shift or during lunch breaks. On weekends, when Sandy allegedly went shopping, she dropped by Frank's apartment if he wasn't working. She even had a spare key to his place. Mark discovered she was buying many things for Frank. Through conversations between Sandy and her best friend Peggy, he found out that Peggy was also having an affair with her brother-in-law. One Saturday, Mark searched Sandy's handbag and located the spare key hidden at the bottom. He swiftly went to the mall and had a duplicate key made. The following week, Mark visited Frank's apartment, a rundown building in a seedy part of town. Security was non-existent, with no surveillance cameras and an unlocked main entrance. Inside the apartment, he placed tiny hidden spy cams powered by long-life lithium button cells. He also uncovered all the expensive items Sandy had bought for Frank. Mark began devising a plan to exit his marriage while inflicting maximum damage on both Sandy and her lover. He had a goldsmith create copies of all Sandy's jewelry using gold-plated copper. He also commissioned a professional to paint a fake Paganol train station with specific instructions. He met with his childhood friend Steve, who was a corporate lawyer. After explaining his plan, Steve arranged a meeting a few days later. That day, Mark met with Steve and his cousin Tracy, an expert auditor. He was completely honest with them. He wanted to legally sink his company and then control it from a distance. Eventually, he intended for Alice to buy back the company in a few years. As he frequently met Tracy, either at her office or for lunch, a friendship slowly blossomed between them. Tracy was a widow. Her husband had died in a car accident, and she hadn't dated since. One day, Mark invited her for dinner and a movie, and she accepted. That evening, Alice went for an overnight stay at her friend's place, while Mark pretended to be working late. Mark pulled into Tracy's driveway and smiled. "Thank you for accepting the invitation," he said. "It's my first date since my late husband passed away," Tracy replied softly. "I understand. I hope you enjoyed it." "I did," she affirmed with a gentle smile. "Can we do it again sometime when you're free?" Mark asked, hopeful. "We have to work together, and you are still married." Tracy leaned in and kissed Mark on the cheek. "Let's take things one step at a time." She opened the car door and walked to her house. Mark then encouraged his wife, Sandy, to upgrade her car. Initially skeptical, Sandy was attached to her fully paid-off Lexus. But when Mark suggested that driving a BMW convertible would make her look younger, she readily agreed. He sold the Lexus and pocketed the money, taking out a loan for the BMW, which he registered under Sandy's name. When Sandy signed the papers, she believed they were just for the car's ownership, not realizing she had signed other documents that would come back to haunt her. Mark was not surprised to hear rumors that Frank was convincing Sandy to divorce him and take him to the cleaners. Unbeknownst to the lovers, Mark had already anticipated their moves. He knew Sandy often let Frank drive the BMW and even allowed him to spend nights in the backseat with her. He was aware of Sandy's visit to a divorce lawyer, recommended by their mutual friend Jasper, and he knew the lawyer would investigate his assets. Acting swiftly, Mark took out a second mortgage on his house to pay for their daughter Alice's education in full. The next day, he declared bankruptcy. He knew that by the time he was served with divorce papers, Peggy, their housekeeper, would change the locks while they were in New York. On the weekend before Alice's departure for college, they hosted a barbecue. Both father and daughter played their parts convincingly. Jasper and Peggy were friendly as ever, with Jasper even helping to grill. No one would have suspected their betrayal. That Friday morning, while Sandy was in the bathroom, Mark took her cell phone and sent Frank a text message. "I'm going to your apartment at 8. I want you to do what you're good at before I walk them one last time. Get permission from work and hurry home to get your things. I'll say I need to buy a few items. Don't call or text me back. I'll leave my phone at home in case they call. See you soon, my future husband." Mark deleted the message after sending it and put the phone back in Sandy's purse. Frank didn't know that as soon as he entered his apartment, 3 men would jump on him and start beating him. With a knife to his throat, they would force him to send a letter of resignation to his manager. Then another letter to the owner of the building saying he was leaving at the end of the month. Then they'll drug him, clean out his apartment, take down the security cameras, and take everything they can carry away to make it look like he's gone for good. They'll wrap his body in a rug, put it in a van outside, and drive away. One man will drive his car. Frank will never be seen again. Neither Alice nor Tracy will know what Mark did to Frank. It will be his secret that he will take with him to his grave. On Friday afternoon, after being served, Mark checked into a motel. That evening, he chuckled while watching the news. Before dinner, one of the men from Frank's apartment arrived to meet him, handed over all the cameras, and took the final payment. No words were exchanged. The man didn't even reveal where Frank's body was buried. On Saturday morning, Mark left the motel, bought a new cell phone, and disposed of his old one. He called Alice to give her his new number, then headed to Tracy's house. There he spent all his time editing the video recordings, blurring Frank's face to prevent any potential link between Frank and his lover if Frank was reported missing. He stayed in the guest room and became friends with Tracy's son. Mark and Tracy then entered the final phase of their plan, which involved having an elderly couple from Seattle, who were actually Tracy's uncle and aunt, purchase the company. No employees would lose their jobs. By Monday, Alice called to inform him that Sandy was looking for him. They both laughed. Later, Mark posted the entire video online and, using a fake email address, sent the link to everyone they knew, including Sandy's brother-in-law. Mark continued to stay at Tracy's for the next 3 months, until his divorce hearing. During this period, although he and Tracy dated, they refrained from any intimate contact. Tracy insisted that Mark could only touch her once he was officially single, and Mark respected her wishes, wanting to honor his marriage vows until the end. Staying at Tracy's also provided an alibi. If there was any investigation, he could claim he was penniless and relying on his friend Tracy's generosity to stay afloat. On the day of the hearing, Sandy was absent from court. Given that the house and Sandy's car had already been repossessed and that Mark was broke and unemployed, the judge granted the divorce without ordering alimony or dividing assets. Sandy's lawyer did not contest the decision. In the hallway, Mark and Sandy's lawyer crossed paths. "You're a very clever man, Mr. Moore," the lawyer remarked. "Am I?" Mark responded with a frown before walking away. Back to the present. Dad, Earth to Dad. "Yes, sweetie, what were you saying?" "It's the father-daughter dance. Everyone's watching us, and you're not moving at all." "Sorry, princess. My mind was elsewhere." Mark took his daughter's hand, spun her around, and they both started to dance to the rhythm of the music. "Now I need to dance with your mom," Mark said to Alice as the song ended. "And I promised my little brother he'd be the third on my dance card." Alice smiled back. Mark walked over to Tracy and invited her to the dance floor. Later, Mark found himself at the bar, ordering a whiskey. He sat down, his thoughts drifting back to that phone call he had received at home in his bedroom. "Good morning, Mr. Moore. I am Dr. Dwight Allen from Dallas, Texas. It concerns your wife." "My wife?" "What's wrong with her?" Mark asked, confused. "She's in the next room right now." "I mean Sandy Moore." Mark hadn't heard that name in 5 years. He collapsed onto the bed. "I'm listening, doctor." "I'm a psychologist treating Sandy Moore in her final days." "Her final days?" "Yes, Mr. Moore. Do you have a moment to allow me to explain the situation briefly?" "Yes, go on," said a bewildered Mark. "Your ex-wife has shared her life story with me, from her childhood to the present. She said you were the only man she ever knew until she met a certain Frank, which she now realizes was a huge mistake. She mentioned the planned divorce and the aftermath. She believes you knew about the affair and set her up. She accepts her fate and the loss of her husband and daughter as consequences of her actions. When she left town, she had only $200 in her pocket. She wanted to go as far away as possible due to her guilt and the video recordings of her indiscretions. She took the first bus out and ended up in Texas. She got a job as a waitress in a seedy, second-rate bar along Interstate 20, frequented mainly by truck drivers. Her landlord rented her a room on the second floor for a small fee, but he used it whenever he wanted. After a year, the owner began pimping her out to truckers. Some used protection, some didn't. When she was brought to the hospital, she was found to have acute STDs and was already infected with AIDS. She has lost a lot of weight and knows she is dying. Her last wish is to see you before she dies. Doctor, I'm really sorry to hear that. My daughter is getting married today. I'll call you next week. Please don't wait too long, Mr. Moore. I'll give you my direct number. Hey, honey, don't drink too much. You'll have to drive us home later, Tracy said as she hugged her husband and kissed him tenderly. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, darling. Mark pushed his glass away. I will never put you and our son in danger. Let's go dance. A couple of days later, from his office, Mark called Dr. Allen and explained that his heavy workload made it impossible for him to make the trip south. The doctor suggested that Mark at least talk to Sandy over the phone. He could transfer the call to her ward, where a nurse could bring the cordless phone to Sandy's bed. Mark, is that you? Came a faint voice. Yes, Sandy, it's me. Oh, Mark, Sandy started to cry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you and our family. Now I'm paying for it. I'd forgiven you, Sandy. I've moved on with my life, and I'm happy, Mark said, taking a deep breath. I need to thank you. After the divorce, I married the most wonderful woman, and we have a son. Alice calls her mom, and they get along very well. By the way, Alice got married last Saturday. It was a beautiful ceremony. Her mom took care of everything. Alice's kids will no doubt call her grandma. We're both looking forward to that moment. Mark could hear Sandy sobbing and a commotion in her ward. He waited until finally a panicked voice spoke. Mr. Moore, this is Nurse Julia. I'm sorry, but I have to end the call. And the phone went dead. Mark looked at the family picture on his desk and smiled. He who laughs last, laughs best, he murmured to himself. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.